ThePrint. You're watching Soft Cover, and this is Nikhil Rampal. 30 years ago, in 1991, India opened up its economy to global competition, and since then, the series of economic reforms has never stopped. Mapping this non-stop journey of economic reforms in the country through the lens of political economy, Mr. Gautam Chikermane, Vice President of Delhi-based public policy think tank Observer Research Foundation, has written the book Reform Nation, published by HarperCollins India, which we are digitally launching today. So first of all, congratulations, Mr. Gautam. Please allow me some time to unveil this book.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
So, Mr. Gautam, my first question to you is, you went to meet the Prime Minister, Prime Minister Narendra Modi from a position which stated that he is not a reformer and has only politics in his mind. This is I'm reading from the introduction. So how did the 2-hour-long conversation with the Prime Minister change your perception about him?
No, I didn't go with the preconceived notion that he's a politician and not a reformer, but with the perception of the outside people. That's not my perception. That's a narrative outside that says that Narendra Modi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, is not a reformer. That is incorrect. He has been reforming, and if you read my book, you will see several new reforms and several old reforms being taken forward at an exponential pace. So I do think Narendra Modi is a reformer. Now, to come to your question as to what transpired in the meeting, I cannot disclose, except the fact that we discussed about economic reforms, we talked about Gujarat, we talked about national reforms at the union level, how the union reforms and the state reforms talk to each other or don't talk to each other, what are the big constraints that come in the way of reforms, and so on. And I found his knowledge about reforms, not only in terms of the policies that he has brought out, but also he has a ground level political, let's say, commitment, conviction for reforms. And that conviction comes politically, and that politics comes from his engagement with the people. So I think to that extent, he's a very rooted, I found Narendra Modi ji to be an extremely rooted person, rooted in India, and yet being able to embrace global technology, geopolitics, complicated reforms such as GST and so on. It was a nice meeting.
So we can say that all those narratives that were built around him were challenged in that 2-hour conversation, if you are not letting us know what exactly happened in the conversation.
Yes, they were challenged with the full force of any intellectual would, and they were answered with the full honesty and conviction, and surprisingly a welcoming conversation, which he was very welcoming in looking at the criticisms against his reforms or non-reforms or lack of reforms, etc. I found him to be an amazingly open person with his facts absolutely under control. So and that's a very major thing. You talk about any reform and he has the numbers right here.
Okay, that brings me to the next question. So when it comes to talking about economic reforms in India, we generally draw the line at the year 1991 when India opened up to global competition. Which year past 1991 would you consider a turning point for India's economic reforms, and on the basis of what policies?
Very difficult to say that. But I think the 1991 Statement on Industrial Policy 1991, that's the name of the policy, the Statement on Industrial Policy 1991. I look at that policy like a road, like let's say a policy infrastructure, let's say an ideological shift, an economic transformative possibility inducing mechanism, upon which all the other reforms have happened. I think in 1991, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao gave an impetus to reforms by saying that reforms work. The subsequent prime ministers that traveled after him and even during his own tenure have shown with the greater conviction how reforms, every prime minister has reformed further. And the outcomes of those reforms are now for us to see. So now the politics, I'm not talking about party politics or ideological politics. I'm talking about the people's politics. There is not a single constituency in this country, not a single constituency that has not benefited from economic reforms that began in 1991 and continue till today. So I think what Narasimha Rao ji did was to give a moral force to taking a U-turn from the policies of the past that were born in 1948, 1956, 1973, 1977, 1980, and 1990. The 6 industrial policies in independent India, and 2 before that, the Bombay Plan of 1944-45 and the industrial policy of 1945. I think Narasimha Rao ji, for the first time, he needed, with great courage, he managed to turn the economy from disaster to something that you and I are now talking on this high technology platforms.
So if you were to talk about the pace of reforms that were launched post 1991, where do you draw the line that, okay, after this year, India launched a series of more reforms, it opened up even more, or if we are to measure the pace of reforms that were brought to the economy post 91, which are the historical years you would count?
I would count, see, there are 3 prime ministers who ran full terms. One is Atal Bihari Vajpayee, one is P.V. Narasimha Rao. Then there is Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Then there is Manmohan Singh, 2 terms, and now Narendra Modi, who is in his second term. So I don't want to count the 1 year or smaller terms, because although they did reform, they did bring in small changes and reforms, but they're not significant enough. Okay. I think the major reforms came during Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's time. No, sorry, not Manmohan Singh. Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister. Yeah. During Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao's time, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee's time, there were great expectations of reforms from Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. But other than reforms around income redistribution, I can't count too many that took the economy forward, although he had full support. And now under Narendra Modi, I see an acceleration of reforms that we did not see earlier. I think he's reforming at a furious pace. In fact, between the time I began to write the book and the time it got published, I had to keep updating my reforms simply because he was reforming at an unprecedented pace. So I would say Narasimha Rao, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and Narendra Modi. These are the 3 big reformers of India.
All right.
Let me clarify.
Yeah, no problem.
You can say that Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was also a reformer, but he was a reformer as a finance minister in the Narasimha Rao government. Here, I'm only talking about prime ministerial leadership. Under his own tenure as prime minister, I did not see too many reforms. That's the small point I want to make.
Part you're talking about.
Yeah.
You mentioned 2 critical pushbacks by the industrial class against the economic reforms. One is the 1991 liberalization policy, and the second is 2021, the farm laws. Where do you think the anger of the industrial class manifests from? What are their insecurities, or what were their insecurities back then? And what do you think could have been done to allay their fears?
I think the Bombay Plan, which was led by Mr. Rahul Bajaj, Ratan Tata and others were all members. They had a point. They said that we have been a closed economy, we have been a controlled economy. Everything, what we buy, what we produce, how much we produce, at what price we sell, to which markets we go, etc., has been a controlled economy. They've had their benefits also, because the controlled economy gave them easy finance as well. But it was a controlled economy. How can you turn overnight into an open economy? How do you expect us to fight global multinationals overnight? Give us some breathing space. That was their core argument. I don't think it was an honest argument, because they embraced parts of the reforms and they were not happy with other parts of the reforms. Having said that, they had a zero political support. So in any case, we have been Indians, we have been forced through various narratives in media, in academia, in films, and even in political conversations to look down upon industrialists. They are the bad guys of India. They are the people who loot you. They are the people who evade taxes. They are the people who do various things, not always ethically. This is what we have been trained to think. And therefore, and government is all good and everything should be government, etc., etc. Now, overnight, you are saying that you need to fight the global multinationals. So their question was, how can we do it overnight? But they could not get any support, could not get any political support. Maybe had they had some political support, they may have been given a 3-year or a 5-year opening, a breathing space, or maybe these could have started earlier. But the constraints that PV Narasimha Rao was facing then, in terms of high inflation, interest rates, and almost on the edge of default, were too high. And I think in the overall picture, he balanced various things. He took a view. Of course, Finance Minister Manmohan Singh and his other fantastic team of people also helped and added their weight to it. But he decided as an amazing politician that perhaps we need to open up. He opened up. Things have gone very well. So you can say that Rahul Bajaj lost, but Bajaj Auto won. His company Bajaj Auto became a beneficiary of this liberalization and the opening up, even though he himself was one of the biggest opposers of this. So these are curious stories that you will read many of them in the book there.
And what about the 2021 pushback, the farm laws?
It is the saddest commentary on reforms. It shows how politics has smothered economics. It shows how petty interests have smothered small and marginal farmers' access to markets, etc. It is the saddest thing to have been done. But again, there is a politics behind it, which sometimes I understand and sometimes I don't. This is the politics that I did not understand. Why? Because for 20 years, report after report after report has come out, including a standing committee of parliament in which almost slightly less than half were the opposition and slightly more than half were the government or the governing coalition members, that said that these mandis around which the reforms were being structured, APMCs, have become dens of corruption. This is written out there, and I've quoted it in my book with the exact, you can go to the source as well. So if all that discussion, debate, and everything is out there, I don't see why, simply because a small collection of rich farmers or middlemen want to continue with the old system of controlling small and marginal farmers, should be allowed. Whatever the case, I think we have gone back 25 years in this. It's going to take one generation of politicians to forget that there was a memory called the kind of violence that happened in India, in Delhi, the kind of people who were killed, the brutality with which they were killed, the police being attacked, and so on. It's not going to fade away easily. I don't think even the strongest of reformers, including if Narasimha Rao were to come today, and he wouldn't dare to touch farm laws. It's a very, very sad commentary on India's political economy.
So what do you think could have been done to, let not this situation arise in the first place? Where did the farmers find it, or where did the so-called people that you're mentioning found it problematic? What could have been their insecurities behind such pushback?
I don't know. I don't think there are any insecurities. From what I saw, the lavishness of the protests with all those massage chairs and pizzas and so on, they were definitely not, it wasn't a mass movement. Please, let us not try to pretend that this was a mass movement. It was clearly a rich people's movement. They managed to do this and they were successful, and good luck to them. But how could this have been saved? I don't know. People ascribe various things. For instance, the government did not speak to people. By 20 years, there has been discussion. What more discussions do you want? I don't understand. So this is something that I do not understand, and I have confessed as much in my book. So if we were to take Prime Minister Narendra Modi's words, he says we were not able to communicate the laws clearly, and hence all this happened. And we have to take it at that face value. There's nothing more for me to add over there.
All right. Now, this brings me to the next question. So, this is a recent phenomena, right? So, we are looking at an exodus of high net worth individuals leaving India. So, what reforms do you think we need to make India a lucrative option for them to stay?
I think people are leaving and coming to various countries. There is a to and fro of various people all the time. I don't look at it as a very big deal, by the way. So people have been coming and going. It's just that with the standards of living have gone up, so many of them are millionaires. So somebody puts that data together and says that all our millionaires are going away. Good luck to them. But you can see new capacities also coming. You can see Apple coming and putting up capacities. You can see chip making, Vedanta and Foxconn, and the big political fight around it, that why did they move from Maharashtra to Gujarat, for instance. So at one level, there is the past where you want to suck out what the industrialist or what the business class has. On the other, you're fighting to retain that business. And the fact that Gujarat has been able to bag the Vedanta Foxconn project is not really surprising. It may have been a short-term expectations, things may have changed. But earlier, even Tata has moved from Sanand, from West Bengal to Sanand. So I think there is an attraction of capital happening. I think big capital is coming to India. It may not be coming at the speed that's required. Having said that, I think we need to clean up our home turf as well. For instance, in an earlier research, it's a book called Jailed for Doing Business. We highlighted 26,134 imprisonment clauses that businesses have to face. A committee was set up, the people are working on it, and I think they're making compliances easier. So we are doing our homework. We as in India is doing its homework. But if there are people who are impatient, why do millionaires go abroad? I have no idea. I mean, I wouldn't want to go, but each has its own. For instance, maybe you're looking for clean air. Maybe you're looking for walkable pavements. Maybe you're looking for better urban infrastructure, maybe better schooling. I don't know. And frankly, I don't care. All I know is that India is becoming an increasingly bigger investment destination. That there are all numbers to support that, from FDI to domestic, including the fact that Nirmala Sitharaman ji recently asked, what can we do in order to retain you? Why are you not investing? These are questions that no finance minister has asked before, so publicly, so openly. It shows a government that is listening. And behind the government that's listening is the politics of people like us, of the people who vote these governments to power. Businesses bring jobs, they bring prosperity, they bring secondary, tertiary benefits to the system, to the geography that they occupy. They come together as clusters, and as clusters, they are able to do various things. And I think that is clearly happening in India. If some people are choosing to go to a low interest rate, low return area, it's probably lack of ambition, or maybe some things that are beyond economics. I don't think economically there is any that you can point and say that this is wrong or this is undone. It remains a work in progress, but I think it's going forward.
Okay, so according to your book, we have come a long way in introducing and implementing economic reforms. But what, according to you, are the key areas which still need to be addressed by policy reforms?
First, the tyranny of the Inspector Raj. 1991 ended the license permit Raj. We expect now that the tyranny of the Inspector Raj, on which there are 69, more than 60, almost 70,000 compliances that businesses have to face at an aggregate, needs to go. How do you end the Inspector Raj? We have given some suggestions, but I think the government is already on it. It is cognizant of the problem. And so Inspector Raj is one thing. What is an Inspector Raj? At any moment, people, do you know how many businesses are there in our country? About 60 million. There are 60 million businesses in our country. You know how many of them are in the formal sector? 1 million.
1 million.
1 million out of 69 million. Now, why is that? Because you prefer to remain under the regulatory radar. You want to remain small. You do not want, the moment you cross a particular threshold, overnight, 20 inspectors can come and raid your place at any point, extract money, corruption, rent seeking, etc. will happen. The boiler inspector, the labor inspector, the canteen committee, etc., etc. So they want to remain under this regulatory radar. Hence, as somebody said, that we are creating dwarfs rather than giants. So we talk about Apple as a $3 trillion company. We took pride in Jack Ma, we take pride in Warren Buffett, but not in India. We don't take pride in our own people who make big businesses. So there is a problem of that regulatory excess regulation, which needs to go away. There is to be greater freedom. And I think with technology in place, things are working and will work. I'm not saying, I'm not speaking from a position of knowledge. I'm not a journalist who knows things, through contacts, etc. I'm speaking from my assessment as an analyst, that if they have done Jan Dhan, if they have done UPI, if they have done direct benefit transfer and so on using technology, I'm sure they can streamline regulatory compliance processes using the same technology or a similar technology. So that is one aspect. Second, I think we need to look at our input costs, power, land, etc. They are much higher than in the rest of the world. However, having said that, I don't think big businesses or large companies are afraid of those prices. They factor them into their calculations and they go forward. Third is the politics around land. A large business needs a large tracts of land. Those land is not available. There is a huge politicization of it. That needs to be freed up. I think the land acquisition law needs a rethink. And I'm not saying we need to snatch land away, but we need to create new kinds of incentive where the landowner becomes a partner in progress. Rather than just we'll give your household a job, etc. I think he needs to become a partner in progress. So that's the second part. Third, to attract global talent, we need global cities. Global cities means more schools, hospitals, entertainment, other than the office where the work, etc. happens. So it's not that you make a great place in the middle of nowhere and expect top talent across the world to come. When they come, they have children, they have their needs, they have their spending, they have their hospital, college, etc. All that needs to. So I think we are looking at, we ought to look at rethinking urbanization in a manner that attracts and retains talent. Other than that, I think state after state is getting cleaner and cleaner. Uttar Pradesh once upon a time was a crime-infested geography. Today, the crime has gone, and you can see Uttar Pradesh as India's second largest state in terms of gross domestic product. So I think those changes are happening. So there is a physical reforms that need to happen at the ground. There are compliance reforms at the legal level, and somewhere they need to meet. And the intelligent money is recognizing that India is changing, that India is reform, like I call it a reform nation. Smart money is coming there. I think the rest of it will follow.
All right. Now, my next question to you is, so this is the final question, sort of a rapid fire round, in which I will ask you the name of the leader, and you have to describe their contribution to economic reforms in 1 or 2 lines. So are you ready, sir?
This is going to be tough, but yeah, let's try.
So let's begin with PV Narasimha Rao only.
He is the person who built the road on which he himself and subsequent prime ministers have delivered several reforms. I have counted 69 of the largest and most impactful reforms in the book, but I'm certain that there are many more ahead. So he is the crafter. He is the reforms bus.
Manmohan Singh.
Manmohan Singh is a person who came with great expectations, particularly because of his track record as finance minister during PV Narasimha Rao's time. But other than wealth redistribution policies, for instance, Narega is a brilliant policy. Mahatma Gandhi MG Narega is a great policy that gives people income security, and it's a very important policy because when there is a market failure happening, that is when the government needs to government intervention is necessary. But other than that, I think his contribution is more in the Indo-US nuclear deal than in on the reforms page, especially during his prime ministerial years.
But as a finance minister, his contribution
Great,
to economic
great.
reforms was...
You read that speech, the 1991 speech. I have excerpts from it, and ignore the fluff which I have also pointed out in the initial part. But that was a speech, and that was the kind of reforms that he brought in. And that speech was supposed to be what he would do as prime minister, which unfortunately he didn't.
P. Chidambaram.
He's not a prime minister, so I have nothing to say.
It's not
But his
about...
contribution to economic reforms are, I can count as one, which is in the 1997 budget. He brought in three tax slabs, and that went on for a long time until 3 years ago, when the tax slabs have now just gone over the hill. Now there are 11 tax slabs. So I like the simplicity of his 3 tax slabs. I like his attempt at collecting black money through VDIS, but that's more as finance minister. I would give credit to Deve Gowda rather than Chidambaram for these reforms.
Arun Shourie.
Again, he's not a reformer he's not a prime minister. I'm sorry if you're asking me these names.
We're not asking about prime ministers. Economists and policy makers who contribute
he's done good work on disinvestment, but other than that, I haven't really studied Shauriji as well as I should have. My focus has been on prime ministers.
Prime ministers. So let's come to Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji.
Roads, the way the national highways that happened, the Pradhan Mantri Gramin Yojana, Sadak Yojana, is what he brought out. So I think Atal Bihari Vajpayee, that was the time, if you remember, when the IT sector was booming, he brought the Information Technology Act. He brought in a lot of reforms.
So let's come to some other finance ministers of the recent past, like Pranab Mukherjee.
Pranab Mukherjee, I see him more as a political person than a finance person. His finance is guided by politics. One of the things, I don't know, I had a chat with him, and he said that, he spoke very well. He's a great speaker, great orator, he was. And he said that we were at 8% growth at that time. So I asked him, like, what is going to take us from 8 to 10 to double digit? So he said, even to retain 8%, it takes a lot of effort. So he's a grassroots, brass tacks kind of a man. He's an executioner. As far as reforms go, I don't see too many reforms under Pranab Mukherjee. I don't think he was a reformer. In fact, if you see the 1991 policy and the 4 preludes that I've given as the run-up to the policy, Pranab Mukherjee was a statist. And he was one person who was completely in the past, although talking about the future, but I think his essential character was of control Raj and in the past. I don't see him as a great reformer.
Arun Jaitley.
Arun Jaitley brought probably the greatest reform that this country has ever seen on the economic side, which is the GST. And that contribution can never be forgotten. But again, I don't think Arun Jaitley would have been able to do this without Narendra Modi. And so I think GST is his biggest contribution, and it's a contribution of a lifetime. It's going to stay forever.
Nirmala Sitharaman.
I think she began on the back foot, but today has come out and is hitting sixer after sixer. She's talking to people. She's engaging with industry. She's open to ideas. In some of my conversations with her, I find her to be extremely open, very knowledgeable. She knows her facts. She knows her data. But despite that, she's very welcoming to new ideas and does think about it deeply. She's a deep thinker. In terms of reforms, I think all the finance ministry reforms have largely come through her. The Atmanirbhar push, the fact that the government will be getting out of all businesses except strategic sectors where we will have 1 or 2 public sector companies, etc. She's there. But again, like with Arun Jaitley or like with Pranab Mukherjee or like with Chidambaram that you mentioned earlier, I would give credit to Prime Minister Narendra Modi than finance ministers. You know what? Your questions tell me that maybe there is a book I need to write on finance ministers.
Maybe that's a new book, but coming to the final personality, speaking of Narendra Modi, now, how will you describe his contribution to economic reforms in India?
I think, Nikhil, what we have seen, what I have seen is that Indian leaders are very good at wealth redistribution or poverty redistribution. Very few leaders have embraced wealth creation. So we keep talking about wealth redistribution because that gets us the votes. We hardly talk about wealth creation. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh once said, he used an Adam Smith phrase, which I'm currently forgetting, basically, let the animal spirits fly. And but there wasn't much to do. Narendra Modi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on the other hand, has embraced both wealth redistribution as well as wealth creation. For instance, I think he, within a month or 2 months, I don't remember, he brought the Jan Dhan Yojana in his first term. That is a wealth redistribution scheme, wherein overnight, I think around 300 million people got bank balance. The unbanked were banked overnight. And I think the execution of that scheme, branch by branch, state by state, district by district, village by village, to give access to the poorest of the poor using Aadhaar and a phone, a bank, something that all bankers, RBI has been talking for 70 years, that, access, we need to give access, and they've been using, penalizing banks for not giving access, and yet we hardly got any access. Overnight, there were 300 million unbanked people became banked. I think that's a very major reform. Not many people talk about it, except in passing. In the same way, he brought out Ayushman Bharat, wherein the poorest 100 million households would get access to tertiary healthcare through insurance worth 5 lakh rupees. So you don't need to worry. You know something? One illness puts several households below the poverty line. So I think this kind of an insurance through Ayushman Bharat is another great thing. What else? He legislated on the business side. He legislated the Indian Bankruptcy Code. We used to talk about, and I've written on how bankrupt companies but rich promoters. This was a contradiction, and through the IBC, which has been now amended 7 times, Narendra Modi is trying to put an end to that. So I think that's there. GST we have already spoken about. At the level of, he has reduced compliances. At the level of middle class, he has legislated a real estate regulator. So when you buy a house, now if it is a RERA certified or not, you need to see. However, you have to be careful. We need to be careful with this reform because it is executed at the state levels. So each state has its own RERA, and some states are good, some are not. But having said that, the fact that there is a real estate regulator, which I've been reading about ever since, I think, like more than 15 years coming. Deepak Parekh has talked about it. So many people have, the DLF promoters, Rajiv Singh has talked about it, but nothing happened. So Narendra Modi brought out the real estate regulator. There are many laws here. I talked about compliance, but there are many other obsolete laws as well, where Narendra Modi has given a very sharp focus to. In the first 5 years, he repealed 1,741 obsolete laws. Now, what is 1,761? Is that a big number or not? In 5 years, he repealed 1,741 obsolete laws. In the previous 66 years, 1,301 obsolete laws were repealed. So the laws are there, they're waiting to be repealed. Somebody has to do this dirty work, the grunge work, understand the complications and linkages with other laws so that the legal status is not diminished in any manner, and then go ahead. So that's, I think, a big reform. It's not been talked about very much, but it's there. Direct benefit transfer. I can't tell you how great this scheme is. Rajiv Gandhi used to talk about how 15 paisa reached out of 1 rupee to the beneficiaries. Now through technology and the Jan Dhan account, straight, all that money is going straight into the pockets of the people who are the beneficiaries. Last year, there was 1.16 lakh crore of money that was transferred. But more than that, 1.8 lakh crore was going to fake accounts. That has been stopped. So I think there is also a reverse governance in the sense of plugging all the leakages. So when you step back, what you see is a reformer not only on the wealth creation side or the wealth redistribution side, but also in the governance structures of the Indian economy. That's how I see Narendra Modi.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gautam, for this thoughtful conversation. It was really fascinating to understand how and why economic reforms have worked in India. I wish you the best for this wonderful book. For more such interesting conversations on books, stay tuned to ThePrint.in.
Thank you.